Of course it's not working, I forgot to switch it on. Right, hi, sorry. You can tell I have got a stonking migraine today, you really can, because my head's all over the place. Right, first off, I'm not playing Fortnite. Stream Elements, get off the bath salts. Seriously. Yes, I am a tube. But yeah, so Stream Elements, put the crap pipe down, pal. Stop. I'm not streaming Fortnite, okay? Seem to have a hard on for Fortnite, that's all well and good, but I am not streaming Fortnite. So if you came expecting Fortnite, my apologies. Oh. Again, my apologies.
Hi, how are you?
I would love to say not too bad, but that would be a lie. But yeah, I'm getting there, Ruth. How about you? So yeah, apologies. I feel like crap. I have a migraine. So Mr. Modman, please don't put the big light on tonight. I don't think I could cope. So yeah. I should write this down, I really should, but just like, not suitable for under 18s. Not because of the subject matter this time, though, funnily enough, but purely because well, me. I'm not suitable for under 18s. But the subject matter tonight is. Actually, it's an interesting one. But I did make a promise last week that I'd found a story where no one dies, and stuck to my word. I have it here. I need to increase the font. Okay, I meant to do that. I did pick that up last week and forgot all about it. But yeah. So nice, light-hearted, I want to say, story tonight. No one dies. Well, I mean technically, but no, you'll get what I mean. But no one dies, and I give up that cigarette because my lipstick's made it sticky, and that's not even my lipstick, it's my lip sealer. It's made it sticky, and it's just, I forgot to move my juice up, sorry. It's made it horrible and it won't stay lit. And why is my phone going? And that's me, just got your message. So, yeah. No, I was having issues with the fact that the Stream Elements was convinced I was playing Fortnite, so I was trying to make sure that I wasn't. I don't even have my Xbox switched on. I'm split screening the day. I've been all day. I don't know what's going on with it. But yeah, tonight's story. Bit refreshing for once. But tonight's story takes place in 1993. So we're pretty much bang up to date. And this actually only came to my attention, this story, about a week and a half ago. I saw it and it just popped up as a news article on Google, and I thought, I'm going to read into this a wee bit, and it's actually a really, really interesting story, so I went with it. Because it's weird, it's unusual. It's no brutal, but it's kind of, it ties in with what we're going for here, so bear with me. So, it takes place in 1993 and centres around a young man named Brandon Lee. No, not the son of martial arts legend and actor Bruce. Just coincidence that he happens to have the same name. In the class of 5C at Bearsden Academy in Glasgow. Now, for anyone that doesn't know, Bearsden in Glasgow, it's a suburban part. It's more upmarket area of Glasgow, as opposed to like your Castlemilks and Rutherglen and places like that. This is more the posher end of Glasgow, so to speak. I used to have a landlady for Bearsden, and she was a bitch. I actually named her the bitch of Bearsden. Because she was there's a lot of well-to-do lawyers and doctors and that kind of person in Bearsden. It's not something I would frequent, put it that way. Although I did work a door there once. Not fun. Everybody thinks they're just all so far up their own arse. But anyway, I'm getting off topic. So, it takes place at it centres around a young lad by the name of Brandon Lee in the class of 5C at Bearsden Academy in Glasgow. Now, Brandon was a 17-year-old Canadian boy with a tragic backstory. I did say technically nobody dies. His mother was an opera singer who had been killed in a car accident, and his father sent him to live with his grandmother in the Glasgow suburb of Bearsden before he also passed away. And his grandmother had just enrolled him in the school. So, young lad, 17, for Canada, mum dies, dad can't cope, ships him off to live with granny in Glasgow, and then dad dies. Pretty much everyone for 5C can remember the day that the nerdy Canadian joined their class. He's described as a gawky looking kid. That was a direct quote, by the way. That wasn't me that was wording that. Although it is something that I would say so. Tall and thin and rather frail looking, with permed hair and oddly thin eyebrows. He carried a briefcase and wore an unfashionable anorak with a drawstring waist. So, kind of goofy looking, by all accounts. But it wasn't his name, his looks, or even his tragic backstory that made Brandon memorable, although his name did cause a few sniggers on his first day, as Brandon Lee, the actor and son of Bruce, was in the news a lot as he had just recently passed away. But it was this young lad's kind nature that made him memorable and popular. Yes, he was a bit different, but he was nice and kind. Even taking bullies under his wing, helping them to reform, listening to their issues without judgment, and offering up helpful advice. He seemed like a pretty decent young man by all accounts. So, he's a nice enough lad. A wee bit goofy looking, but he's kind-hearted. To the point that he's even being nice to bullies. So that's kind of cool, right? I mean, he's helping. Surely. He was also clever. Like IQ of 161, genius level clever. But not just that, he was active in many sports and clubs. He joined the football team and the debating club. He starred in the end of year musical and introduced his classmates to cool retro bands. The cherry on top for this young Brand. I wrote Brando, but it's Brandon. Oh my god. I need to stop watching fucking Storage Wars before I go to bed. Or before I go to sleep. Tell you I couldn't spell. Was that he got top grades, a glowing reference and a place at university. So, this boy's clever, popular, kind, kind of weird looking, but everybody loves him. Yeah. Now I've seen pictures of him. He was goofy looking. Okay? Young Brandon was certainly, by all accounts, I knew I'd used that before, by all accounts, don't write when you've got fucking migraine. Oh, you miss things. A brilliant young man with a bright future ahead of him. So what's the catch? Because, as we all know, I wouldn't be telling this story if there wasn't a catch. So, did young Brandon go on a killing spree? Was he horribly murdered? No, because I did promise you a murder-free story this week. And besides, how can you kill someone that doesn't exist? Yep. That's right. Young Brandon Lee wasn't real. He was, in fact, Scotland's most notorious imposter, a 30-something-year-old failed medical student by the name of Brian McKinnon, who had already attended Bearsden Academy back in the 70s, when he actually was a teenager. Yeah. That explains the cool retro music and they've been able to offer helpful advice, especially to bullies. But Brandon Lee wasn't real. He was 30-something-year-old Brian McKinnon and not a 17-year-old Canadian boy. Yeah. So many questions. Now, this is how it caught my attention, by the way. Because I'd never heard of this. I mean, I was 9. I was 9 in 19... I turned 9 at the beginning of 1993. And my husband was born at the end of 1993. But I'd never heard of this. But then, back in 1993, there was no fucking internet. So, obviously the story never got out. Now, nearly 30 years later, his extraordinary deception has been made into a documentary named My Old School. Directed by his old 5C classmate, Jono McLeod, and starring Alan Cummings as Brian. And it features his old friends and teachers. The movie premiered at the Sundance Film Festival on 24th of January, so just last week, and includes a rare interview with Brian that gives a riveting insight into his almost unbelievable tale. Now, the way the film is, there's only one paid actor in this film, in this movie, and it is Alan Cummings, and he plays grown-up Brian. And the way it's shot is, you don't hear Alan's voice at all in this movie. And it's really interesting the way they've done it. Jono McLeod, the director, he has interviewed Brian, and they have the best way I can describe it is they have it's Alan speaking, but they've dubbed in Brian's voice, so Alan's pretty much lip syncing, and we're getting Brian's voice coming across as if he was doing the interview, but obviously he's not on camera. So and obviously there's interviews with teachers and classmates, and it seems to be really well done, but I cannot find a general release date. and I've been looking and I can't find it. All I can find sorry, you can't see me for that mic. All I can find is the Sundance release, which was one article I read said the 23rd of January, but everywhere else said the 24th of January. But either way, it's been premiered at Sundance, and hopefully we will see it at some point in general release. I would like to think so, because I would like to watch it. I think it would be quite an interesting movie. Right. Now, Brian's story began in the 70s when he first attended Bearsden Academy, where he got the grades to secure a place at Glasgow University. It would seem that Brian had always wanted to become a doctor. And it was because of this dream that he would later return to his old high school under the guise of 17-year-old Brandon Lee. Unfortunately for Brian, his original plans to become a doctor fell apart when an unexplained illness forced him to drop out of university. He was still determined to become a doctor, but after 6 or 7 false starts, failed exams and second attempts, on top of missing the window to return to university, it became clear that Brian McKinnon was never going to be admitted to any university to study medicine. So this man desperately wanted to become a doctor, and he had the grades for it. And he had the brain power for it. He just fell short because ill health. And it's sad. But that's when, after the death of his father, oh no, whatever, I've been suffering from a migraine all day and a dog that won't stop whining. I honestly didn't think dogs could get that high-pitched. Turns out they can. Because you might even be able to hear them, because I've got a good quality mic when it's working, because I was having issues earlier. I think the issues were actually not the mic, but Discord. But well, not even Discord, but Spud. But we all love Spud. Spud's great. Praise Spud. Oh no, Doug's seriously broken, man. Oh. Right. So, in the death of his father in 1993, he set his master plan in motion. Because if Brian couldn't become a doctor, then maybe Brandon could. As he says in the film, the thing you have to do if you really want to prevail is do the unimaginable. And so, 17-year-old Canadian Brandon Lee was born. I mean, it's the same, I guess that's true. I mean, it's the same kind of theory where if you rule out all the possibles, then surely, or the probables and possibles, then surely only the impossible remains. So, here he was, he had nothing left to lose. He was going to get one last shot, and why not? You know? But, seriously, what normal person in their 30s thinks that pretending to be a spotty teenager and returning to their old high school is not only a good idea, but that nothing could go wrong? I mean, I'll tell you who. No one. That's who. I paid for Brian. Because, let's face it, high school sucked, okay? For the majority of us, first time round, high school sucked. Okay? And we were glad to be out of the place as soon as we could. Instead, wouldn't even consider going back. Only time I wanted to return to high school was 18 months ago when they were demolishing it. I wanted to go in and see it one last time, but we weren't allowed. To be fair, right, Bearsden wasn't Brian's first choice. But the home he shared with his mother. Yep, this 30-something-year-old man that's going back to high school pretending to be a 17-year-old Canadian still lives at home with his mother. Why are we not surprised? Really? Oh, God love you, Brian. But the house was outside the catchment area for other schools in the area. So, it was his old school or no school at all. So he continued with his plans, hoping that a fake Canadian accent, 3 stone weight loss. He was really committed to this, but, like, seriously. 3 stone weight loss. I'm lucky if I lost 3 pounds. Freshly permed hair and carefully plucked eyebrows. I don't get that. Never quite figured that bit out. It's not like he's a teenage girl, you know. Would do the job. And it actually worked. Like, seriously, how blind were the staff in this high school that they couldn't tell the difference between a man in his 30s and a teenage boy? And not just any teenage boy, but one that looked almost identical to one that had been there less than 20 years ago. They taught him. And it was the same kid, just with a dodgy accent. The staff, they didn't ask to see a birth certificate. They didn't bother checking his references, because if they had, here's the funny bit, if they checked his references, they would have noticed that one of them was in fact Marsha Hunt, the former girlfriend of Mick Jagger. But they never noticed. They didn't bother checking. Despite all that, nobody actually put 2 and 2 together. Like, oh. No Mr. Blair, the maths teacher who had taught him 13 years earlier, the headmaster, Mr. Norman MacLeod, who said Brandon fitted in so well. It was as if the school were made for him. Well, no shit, he was there 13 years earlier. Or even his new form teacher, Gwyneth Lightbody, who thought he perhaps suffered from some illness that made him age rapidly. Yeah, she actually said that, people. So, here we have 3 well-educated individuals who are responsible for the education and well-being of teenagers. Teenagers! They're a handful. These people are in charge of them. And they couldn't tell the difference between a teenage boy and a 30-something man. I mean, if my child had been gone to that school during this time when this was discovered, I'd be screaming for them to be fired. Like, straight away, just get them out of that school, kick them out. I mean, think about it. Brian was there. Posing as Brandon to get into university and become a doctor. He meant no harm. He wasn't a danger to the children. In fact, he'd been helping them. He was, it was kind of... But what if his intentions weren't as good? What if this adult man was a child predator? Who was there to prey on these teenagers? The clueless idiots running the school would have had no idea that the children were in danger. Children that were in their care. We were a right crowd of dopes, Lightbody later explained. No, love. No. At best, you were negligent. At worst, you could have been responsible for the children in your care being injured, abused, or even killed by this 30-something man posing as a teenager that you didn't notice. Dopes, not quite strong enough. Mindless, reckless, incompetent morons. But no dopes. A crowd of dopes. Brandon was welcomed at the school with open arms. After all, he was the perfect student. He was polite, intelligent, and eager to learn. He was described as being a teacher's dream. Obviously, because he had been there before. And again, no one picked up in this. Like, 30-something man. There were a few clues to his real age. Like when he said he remembered Elvis dying in 1977. And the year that Brandon was supposedly born. No, nobody picked up. He was seen driving in Bears Den. Can't drive in Scotland at that age. Been seen driving for he was 16. 16-year-olds can't drive about the streets. And he always seemed to know more than the other students, especially when it came to the sciences. Well, obviously, because he'd learned it all before. Oh my God, name the con, don't do this. Oh my God. He had a love for older music. Oh, that's not really something to worry about. My husband likes music that was out before he was born. That's not that big a deal. And when he was performing in the end of year show, he was very reluctant to kiss his co-star, Val Douglas, because she was still a child. I mean, that goes in his favour, right? Didn't he feel good about that? He didn't feel right doing that, so he didn't. Can it make sense? Yeah, I know I do. But over Overall, Form 5C liked him and accepted him into the fold. They even gave him the very fitting, if not ironic, nickname of 30-something because he seemed more grown up than the rest. They nicknamed him 30-something because he seemed more mature than the rest and's got a roll of wee singing. Hopefully my lips have dried enough that it doesn't go all soggy because So, yeah, why is that so far over there? No, I need to go that way. That's better. I'm sitting very far to the... But, I mean, how did they not notice that there's... I mean, how stupid are they teachers? You can't even enroll a kid into a primary class without a birth certificate. So what, he puts on a fake dodgy accent and a fake Canadian accent? Oh, my parents are dead. I live with my granny. I ain't bother, lad, no nan. Wait, do you know I was somebody that was here 13 years ago? No, that's fine. You're Canadian. You wouldn't have kent him. What? Like, really? Mum, this is clean up again. So, yeah, they never picked up on it. Because apparently they were a crowd of dopes. Incompetent fucking idiots. Oh. Soon, he was being invited to bars, birthday parties, climbing trips and pub quizzes, where he wowed everyone with his extensive general knowledge. But nobody clicked on. Excuse me. He had a great time upon returning to high school, perhaps even enjoying it more than when he was first enrolled there. Well, yeah. I nae bother, kiddo. Catch on YouTube later. His friendships seemed genuine, and he even continued to catch up with his school friends in the holidays and when they went off to university. So, yes, he was a good bit older than these kids, but they welcomed him in and they accepted him, no questions asked, as one of their own, and he dealt with the bullying problem and for them, and he helped them in the pub quizzes, and he got them interested in music that they wouldn't have otherwise known about. I mean, yeah, they didn't ken he was an adult, but they knew he was weird, but they didn't realise that he was an adult, and they did genuinely like Brandon. And because Brian had already been through the awkward teenage phase, he was able to advise them properly. Because he'd been there. He'd been through what what they were going through, so I can understand that. But it must have been exhausting keeping up the pretense. But he did it. And he did it well. But he remembered that he couldn't stand out too much for his academic abilities, and he might get his name in the papers. Yeah, Canadian transfer student, child prodigy. Wait a minute, that's 30-something-year-old Brian McKinnon. Yeah, so he took his foot off the pedal a bit, direct quote, so he didn't draw attention to himself outside of the school. So that was... He kens he's got to downplay things and he's not got to appear like a child prodigy. Which... it's quite clever of him, really, when you think about it that way. After 4 terms and a 15-year hiatus, all his hard work had paid off. And in 1994, Brandon was accepted to Dundee University to study medicine. His dream of becoming a doctor was now closer than ever. That was until 1995, when it all came crashing down during his second term of his degree. Now, it's still not really clear how the truth was discovered, but there's 2 theories. One theory being, if this cigarette does not stay lit, I'm going to crack up. The first one being that a medical textbook for Brandon was delivered to a neighbour who knew him only as Brian, leading to the truth being discovered. The second theory, kind of less believable, but in this one he was arrested during a drunken brawl while on holiday in Tenerife. This story is not really believable because Brian really drank and was always lecturing his young friends about the dangers of alcohol. It was also said that he was found in possession of 2 passports. One for Brian and one for Brandon. But he strongly denied ever owning a passport for Brandon. I mean, how could he have a passport for somebody that doesn't exist? Unless it's a fake. But in Scotland, they're not easy to come by. Especially when you're a nobody. You know, you need to have some serious coin for that. And here's a man that's... well, he's back in university, pretending to be, well, for now, 19. So, it's very unlikely that the bad brawl in Tenerife theory is true. And it is more likely that the neighbour stumbled upon it by accident. But, whatever the truth, Brian's elaborate hoax had come to an end. And he was called back to the school and asked to prove that he was, in fact, Brandon. Which, of course, he couldn't, because Brandon Lee didn't exist and never had. Within hours, the world's media was all over the story and had descended upon the small Glasgow suburb of Bearsden. So, truth was out. which kind of sucks. But, well, for Brian at least. The school's administration team became the subject of intense ridicule and had rightly become a laughingstock. People demanded to know if the real children at the school had been put at risk. And who could blame them? After all, this 30-something man had been not only learning with them, but had also been socialising with them outside of school hours. But it all became clear that Brandon had simply been desperate to further his education in hopes of finally becoming a doctor, and in fact he had actually helped the children rather than being a danger to them, and that this whole thing started because Brian had wanted to become a doctor to help people. So the children were never in any danger from Brian or Brandon. But you can't blame people for wondering that. Because of his kind nature and him being a nice guy, his young friends refused to give up on him. A bunch of them even wrote letters to news agencies in support of him, thanking him for his friendship, wishing him luck, and saying they would always be there for him. They clearly saw him as a friend, and one that they weren't going to simply forget about, even if he had lied to them about his identity. So these kids, they saw that he was a nice guy. Yeah, he'd duped them, but he never harmed them, he helped them. And yeah, he was never going to get his wish of becoming a doctor, but his friendship meant a lot to these kids, so, or at least they thought so. Headmaster Norman MacLeod was remarkably forgiving, saying he will be remembered here as an unselfish, considerate, bright, friendly former pupil. Many of the staff, I think, understand his motives and do not feel hostility to his deception. So even the staff at the school knew that, yeah, he had deceived them, but his intentions, they weren't bad. He was trying to be a doctor. He just bombed out the first time round. So, yeah. Even the parents were pretty forgiving. Yes, there was frustration, but I think mainly at the school's failings. But no real resentment towards Brian, because there was nothing remotely threatening about him, and he wasn't harming anyone, he was simply trying to better himself. As one parent so elegantly put it at the time, he wasn't beating up wee old grannies. So even the parents of these kids that were friends with him, even they didn't have any ill will towards him, because he never hurt anybody. Like this one said, it's not like he was hurting, he never went out and beat up all grannies for their pension. You know, he simply went back to school with fake identity, pretending to be a 17-year-old boy. Okay, right, so yeah, it's a bit dodgy, but he simply went back to school. There wasn't even proper outrage at the fact that he'd been on holiday with two teenage female friends. Perhaps because as Mrs. Lightbody. Remember her? The one that said they were a crowd of dopes. As she put it, you would have been more worried about Brandon's safety in their hands rather than the other way around. So even then, they knew he never posed a risk to these two teenage girls that he'd been on holiday with. I mean, he didn't want to even kiss one of them in a school show. If anything, he was considered a good influence to the teens. But none of that mattered. The truth, no for Brian, because the truth being discovered was catastrophic. And I couldn't spell Brandon right, but I spelled catastrophic right first attempt. Oh my God. Reporters followed him everywhere, and were calling him names like Walton Mitty and Peter Pan, offering him riches to tell his story. It got so bad that he eventually stopped leaving the house. His mother, who believed that he had returned to Bearsden as a mature student, which is not actually unheard of, because my dad's older brother, he did that. He returned to high school as a mature student when his kids were at high school. So he went to high school with his own kids. So that's no unheard of. So the mum thinking that, I take it anybody looking would have thought the mum was the gran, but anybody thinking that, the mum thinking that, it's totally believable that she would believe that. I mean, I looked into it at one point, returning as a mature student. So that part is believable. But when she discovered the truth, she was devastated. I mean, I don't get why she was devastated, but never mind. But worst of all, he was thrown off his medical degree at Dundee University for lack of integrity, because he'd lied about who he was. Can I see their point? You don't want your doctor no being who they say they are, you know? In the end, it was all for nothing. Didn't have his medical degree that he longed for, and that he'd worked so hard for so many years. And he has lived in terrible limbo ever since. His life has been on hold. Plans shattered, ambition thwarted, and enormous brain power wasted. Because remember, this guy got a 161 IQ. That's genius level shit. That's higher than mine. And before anybody says it, I actually do have a high IQ, okay? I just play dumb. Unless I'm asked to spell. But no, seriously, he had a 161 level IQ. That is phenomenal. And it was wasted. This man wanted to be a doctor. He could have been the best in his chosen field in medicine. But he never got the chance, and it's a shame. Poor Brian McKinnon now lives in a small, modest flat in Glasgow, where for many years he has lived on benefits and survived on a poor diet. He spends most of his time in the library nursing conspiracy theories and bizarre beliefs that he was the victim of assassination attempts. He looks thin and grey and doesn't interact with many people these days. Hopefully, his old school friend Jono from 5C had some luck talking to him, and we can finally hear, in his own words, what happened. And when the truth comes out, maybe, just maybe, Brian will finally be able to get his life back on track. So not a happy ending in this one, I'm afraid. Now, Brian should probably have looked into this, but Brian will now be in his 60s, maybe older. Wait, if he went to high school in the 70s, that puts him at about 50. Yes, he'll be in his mid-60s, mid to late 60s. And he's got nothing. All the news agencies offered to make him rich. He lives on benefits. And by all accounts, he's lost the plot, buried in conspiracy theories and thinking that people are trying to have him assassinated. All because he was so desperate to become a doctor. That's just... it's heartbreaking. And he finally got his shot, and he was finally at Dundee University studying medicine, and he was kicked out for lack of integrity. Just... it's a shame. You feel sorry for him because he did work so hard, and he was so good to those kids, and he was so nice, and he genuinely cared about them. He was never a danger to them. He only ever wanted to become a doctor and help people, and he's never going to get that chance. And now he's in his mid to late 60s. He's got nothing. A pokey little flat in Glasgow and living on benefits. He'll get what, a couple of £100 a month? Just... it's a shame. It could have all been avoided if he just... if he hadn't took ill. If he hadn't missed the deadlines, if the book had been sent to the right address, you know, it's a sad tale. But hopefully, with story coming out now, and with him getting the chance to put his story across, hopefully it'll mean that he can move on. I mean, let's face it, Brian McKinnon's never going to get a happy ever after. But maybe he can at least find some peace and stop with all the conspiracy theories. Maybe, I don't know, maybe he can find peace. Maybe he can find the help that he clearly needs, that he obviously isn't getting if he's sitting in libraries all day researching conspiracy theories, and if he's convinced that people are trying to have him assassinated. I mean, yeah, you done fucked up, boy, but no bad enough that people would want you dead. Because you never... I mean, technically you never broke any laws, you never hurt anyone, you never killed anyone. You just pretended to be a 17-year-old boy for a few years. But, I mean, the school were a joke for allowing him to enrol. They really were. The press hounding him and calling him names to the point that he became a recluse and refused to leave his house. I mean, they offered him all these riches to tell his story, and then he ended up with nothing. Terrified his own fucking shadow. And it could have all been avoided if the school had just... Yep, very much, Wraith. It is a very thin line between genius and crazy. It's like when your IQ is that high, it can get tighter on the edge. It's like you're walking a tightrope. I mean, the best way to think about it would be a computer. There's only so much you can store on a computer before it starts slowing down. And I mean, it doesn't matter the RAM and the CPU and everything else that's on the computer, the size of the hard drive, none of that matters. Once it starts getting full, it starts slowing down. And the human brain's pretty similar to that. So people with genius level IQs, they store so much information that eventually they start shutting down. And it definitely does seem like that's what's happened in this case. And it's such a shame that it's ended up like this. And I really, really do hope that I'm loose. I shouldn't be loose. I really do hope that with this story coming out, I hope for a start that John O'MacLeod, his old school pal, I hope he does Brian some justice and maybe gives him a few quid for this, you know? Maybe lines his pocket a wee bit for telling his side of the story, like the press promised today all the years ago. Maybe help the lad out, you know, because he's clearly suffering. I mean, he's living off of benefits and he's in a couple of £100 a week. If they've made this movie about him, surely they can help the boy out and, you know, give him a few quid. But I'm hoping that his side of the story getting released finally after all these years, hopefully it brings him some peace, and hopefully he gets, that's better, hopefully he gets the help that he so desperately needs. But I don't think we're going to get a happy ending in this. There's no fairy tale ending for Brian McKinnon. If he can just try and have some kind of normal retirement, take up golf or fishing or something like that, keep him out of the library and stop him thinking folk are trying to kill him, maybe that would help, but I don't know. We'll see. But I'm going to leave it there for tonight. Next week, I'm working on a story. Unfortunately, for some, it's going back to the much darker side. And there is murder involved in this next one. But it's one that I've been doing a bit of research on, and it's another interesting one. But I'll be back same time next Sunday. Hopefully, fingers crossed, minus the migraine, because that's really been doing my box. And it's actually started easing off now because I've been sitting in the dark. But so hopefully, I'll be alright. I'll be fighting fit for next week. But yeah, I'll be back at the same time Friday. Friday, no. I don't stream on a Friday. Sunday. Ginge will be streaming something tomorrow. And I'll be back for Metal and Mayhem on Tuesday. Now, I believe the new update for Fortnite is coming on Tuesday. Believe we're getting a rather large character introduced, so that could be interesting. So we'll be back then. But thank you to everybody that joined me. Bit of a shorter one tonight, but it was a story that I thought needed to be told. And obviously John McLeod of Class 5C and Bearsden Academy thought so too. And got Alan Cummings to play the lead. So yeah, he obviously liked the story. I don't know. But yeah, like I said, I randomly found it on Google and thought, hell yeah, I'm looking into this. So yeah, I'm gonna leave it there, but big thank you to everybody that's come up and joined me. Turn my mouse on, that would help. And I will be back on Tuesday. Yeah, Tuesday for Metal and Mayhem. Bye bye now.